Hi, Evan.
How are you? It's great to see you. It's great to be
Good,
with you
good,
and
good.
your audience and your listeners.
Yeah. I see a couple of people already join us. Hey, hi everyone. Say hi. So yeah, I have here family law attorney, and we're gonna talk about all the interesting stuff of divorces, prenup, those kind of stuff. So whatever questions you have, just put in the comment, and then we can get started. So yeah, Evan, why don't we introduce yourself? I know we met on LinkedIn. You kind of helped me out a little bit with a situation of mine. So tell people like what exactly do you do?
Sure, absolutely, Christine. I want to first
Mm-hmm.
thank you, and it's great to be with you and all your audience and your listeners. It's really great to be with everybody. I'm a matrimonial and divorce attorney. I'm located in New York City. My firm is Berkman, Botker, Newman and Schein. I'm a partner and the head of litigation at my firm. We practice in New York. We practice in New Jersey. My individual practice focuses on prenuptial agreements, working with families, working with people in prior to marriage, helping to protect their assets, protect their income, protect their businesses. And I also work with
Mm-hmm.
people going through a divorce. And I
Mm-hmm.
work with people going through a divorce and the prenup stage where money and expectations and communication is such an important, part of the conversations that I have with clients on a daily basis. I also work with athletes and entertainers in the divorce and prenup stage as well.
Wow, that sounds really interesting, Evan. Okay,
Yeah,
so
there's never a dull moment in what I do.
yeah. So why did you pick this particular specialty?
It's a great question, and I love what I do. I always joke when I'm asked the question, I wouldn't practice any other area of law. And first and foremost, I love helping people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love
Yep, yep.
helping people, before you embark on life's journey of marriage. I love working
Mhm.
with couples to help plan their financial future, to have the difficult conversations about money, about future, about jobs, about expectations. I love it. And the thing about work I do in the family law space is you're working with people and you're making a
Mhm.
difference and you're helping people go from one place to a different place. And that different place is often a better place. And it's
Mhm.
rewarding and it's satisfying and helping people navigate a very difficult and challenging time in their lives in a divorce and
Mhm.
seeing people come out of such a
Mhm.
challenging transitional
Mhm.
process in a better
Mhm.
place, it's rewarding and I love it.
Okay, so let's talk about prenup. So I know, like, when I talk to people, people have, either one side says, "Oh no, that's not very romantic," and the other side says, "Oh, that's realistic." So tell me, tell me more about. So what do you think? Should all couples have prenuptial, or like when does it make sense and when does it make sense?
Hey, Christine, it's a great question. And look, the truth is, having a conversation about money, talking about a prenuptial agreement, there's
Hmm.
nothing romantic about it. The reality is, you're really saying, look, I love you. I can't wait to marry you. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you, but I also can't trust you. And so
Yeah, exactly.
it's a very hard conversation.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
the truth is, it's important, right? Although
Yeah.
it's not a romantic conversation or easy conversation, I would tell you that there's not a more important conversation to have before you
Hmm.
get married than the
Yep.
one about money. And it could be
Exactly.
about wills, it could be about estate planning, it could be about
Hmm.
what is going to be your financial practice during your marriage. But with respect to
Hmm.
prenuptial agreements, should everyone have a prenuptial agreement? No. People should have a prenuptial agreement when there's a reason, when it makes
Hmm.
sense, if there's something to protect. And I work with
Hmm.
clients at the high net worth space. I also work with clients who will call and they'll look to protect the business or they'll look to
Hmm.
protect a certain income stream. And it's incredibly important to have those conversations. But look, a prenuptial agreement is not necessary for everyone, but for a lot of couples, it is
Hmm.
absolutely necessary. And look, in the event of a divorce, right?
Hmm.
If you don't have a prenuptial agreement, right? Assets, income, accounts, businesses, things are subject to being divided in the
Hmm.
absence of a prenuptial agreement. So it's an important conversation. And one of the benefits of a prenuptial agreement or any agreement, both people can come to an agreement on their own terms, as opposed to
Hmm.
letting a judge decide in the event of a divorce, as opposed to fighting it out years later if something goes wrong. But in the perfect ideal world, you
Mm-hmm.
start the conversation early in the process. You try to put emotions aside. You recognize that they exist. You work with financial, a financial coach. You work with third-party professionals. You work with a family law attorney, a whole team approach to help you facilitate and go through this process.
Yep, yep, for sure. I think like way before you get married, you should start talking about finance. So I'm really proud of the couples who come to me, like they were about to get. Actually, most of them were engaged or about to get engaged. They're coming to me now to actually talk about their finances. So I'm really proud of that. So, okay, so someone from Facebook actually asked me. It's not showing who, but then I know who this is. This is Tony Cannon. So he asked, I am an RIA financial advisor. How should I handle the question for a young couple that comes to me and says one side wants a prenup and the other says no way?
It, it's a great question, and it's one that I'm asked a lot. And the question describes a very normal situation. It is pretty rare for two people to jump out of their seat and say, "I can't wait to have a prenup." It doesn't really work like that. And so, to me, it's about communication. It's about transparency. It's
Mm-hmm.
about working together in that exact situation to help the other person understand what it's
Mm-hmm.
about, why it's important. And I think the more you can have those conversations, communicate,
Mm-hmm.
communicate. I'll say it again,
Mm-hmm.
communicate,
Yep.
because
Yep.
communication really is the key to a
Mm-hmm.
lot of this, right? And the more transparent you can be about the reasons, about the intent, about what it is that you're looking to protect, I think it goes a long way in helping shift the conversation, shift the mindset of the other person to help you
Mm-hmm.
realize that this is really about planning. It's really about preparation. And I'll take it a step further. To go to the question, which is a great one. What I often find is that the prenuptial conversation, while it may be a hard conversation initially, what it does, it acts as a springboard for future financial
Yep.
conversations. Look, the
Yep.
reality is, if you can have this conversation, what it really will do, and if you can get through it, for a lot of couples, it's a relationship strengthening moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you can
Yep.
get through this conversation, the prenup process, work with a financial advisor,
Mm-hmm.
financial coach, talk about your kids, your future, estate planning, you're on the path in a good direction to have
Mm-hmm.
difficult conversations, get through it, and talk about real life issues that you will encounter going forward.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So, okay, I hope that answered your question, Tung. That's a really good question. So, yeah, because like I was just thinking, like normally, if, like one side is like really rich or has a lot of money, they're gonna marry someone who's not. So, if the rich person is smart, then I think they would do a prenup. But how do you talk about that, right? So it's really saying, okay, then we divorce, and I'm not sure that
Yeah,
you just marry.
it's not easy. It's not
Yeah,
easy, but prenuptial agreements should be fair, right? They should be
yeah.
fair, and both sides should understand what it
Mm-hmm.
is that they're looking to protect. What rights are they giving up?
Mm-hmm.
The truth is, the agreement, you want the agreement to stand the test of time, and so
Mm-hmm.
you want the agreement to be fair. You
Yeah.
don't. The ideal scenario, you sign an agreement, you negotiate it. Both sides are, I don't want to say happy with it, but they can live with it. You put the agreement in a drawer and you don't think about it. You don't look at it ever again, right? It's like insurance policy on your marriage. And you're right,
Mm-hmm.
it's not romantic to think about taking out an
Yeah.
insurance policy on your marriage. But look, none of us would buy a house without, insurance. You wouldn't have a
Mm-hmm.
car
Yep.
without insurance. And
Yep. Yep.
while it's not a sexy conversation or an easy conversation, it's important.
Yep.
And again, it's really protection, and when it
Yep.
makes sense, it matters.
Yep, yep, exactly. So okay, let's talk about what there's no prenup. Like how I know different state might be
Sure.
handled differently. So generally, how does that work? Like in California, New York, or in Nevada, let's say there's no prenup, and then a divorce happened. How does that usually work?
Sure. So, I practice in New York, as I mentioned, but to speak
Hmm.
generally, what a prenuptial agreement is, a prenuptial agreement allows people, okay, to take the same issues, alimony, division of assets,
Hmm.
residence, bank accounts, and you can negotiate the same
Hmm.
issues that a court would decide in the event of a divorce, but you're deciding it. You're deciding on your own in an agreement how the accounts will be split, how much
Mm-hmm.
money someone else will receive, what is a payout going to look like. So one of the beautiful things about an agreement is that you are the one who's negotiating it and you're coming to terms as opposed to letting a judge decide down the road. And you are saving, look, divorce is not inexpensive. Divorce is emotional, it's expensive, and
Mm-hmm.
by having a prenuptial agreement, you're resolving these issues before you even get to that place. And so
Yep.
you're saving time, you're saving money. But the
Mm-hmm.
truth is, in the absence of a prenuptial agreement, if you don't have one, if you don't sign one, there's a lot of issues on the table in the event of a divorce. To give you an example, if you own a business, right? For example, you own a business, let's say someone owns 100% of the business.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, the non titled spouse, the spouse that does not own the business, would have a claim to a percentage of the value of the business in the event of a divorce. And so a prenuptial agreement can make certain accommodations. You could agree to certain things, buyouts, payouts, and the same would be true no matter what state you're in, because again, a benefit of an agreement is you can come to your own terms.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Got it. Okay. So how does that work in like California? Like what do you look for in certain in different states? So okay, like I'm not sure if you're familiar with Nevada too. So California is a community property, right? And then New York is a community
Yeah, so
property. Okay.
it's a great question. So
Okay.
California and New York are different. And so,
Okay.
California, divides property 50-50, community property,
Okay.
whereas New York is an equitable distribution state. So
Oh,
New
okay.
York does not automatically divide property equally or
Okay.
50-50. New York
Got
looks at a whole host of factors: contributions to the marriage, how long were you married,
okay.
what was
Okay.
the marriage is a partnership, but New York will look at the contributing factors in
Mm-hmm.
deciding should someone receive 50% of an asset or
Mm-hmm.
should someone receive less than 50%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're saying that let's say the husband makes I don't know 90K and then the wife is let's just say okay, it's New York City, so it's gonna be 200K, and then the wife is a stay-at-home mom. So then how will that work? Then she doesn't have any money. She's been staying at home, and then she's been taking care. Let's say they have 4 kids, and then they divorce later on. I don't know, 5 years later, the
Sure.
kid is 4 years old. So how does that typically work? Because let's say she never worked throughout the marriage because the husband has been paying for everything. So if we go by equitable, she doesn't really have money financially, but she did contribute to the household.
No, it's a great question. And
Hmm.
marriage is a partnership, right? Marriage is a partnership,
Yep.
and people have different roles in
Hmm.
their
Hmm.
respective relationships. It might be one person's, job or expectation to, be the, primary source of income. It might be someone else's responsibility to raise the kids. It might
Hmm.
be, you might have a situation where both people work and participate in raising the kids. Every situation is different. But
Hmm.
the way to look at it is there's different boxes and you have child support. So you bring up in your example, child support, how much would she receive? That's one box. And
Hmm.
that's one consideration, which is child support is a monthly sum that one
Hmm.
person receives going forward, right? Then you have equitable distribution, which is a division of the assets,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That's what I was referring to: bank accounts, 401ks, IRAs,
Hmm.
stock options. How do we divide assets?
Hmm.
Then the 90,000, 40,000 income in your
Hmm.
example, that would go to a concept called alimony. How much
Hmm.
money would the higher earner have to pay to the less moneyed spouse for alimony? Now that's
Hmm.
alimony, then you have child support, and then you have
Hmm.
how much money someone receives after the assets are divided. So it depends on, alimony for how long will depend on the duration of the marriage. There's a lot of factors, but
Hmm.
generally you try to figure something out that's
Hmm.
fair for all people
Hmm.
and all parties involved.
Got it, got it. Because like when you say, okay, so I have a client, they live in California, and you say it's a community property. It's the same scenario too. He makes very good money, and then she was a stay at home, but then like she doesn't have much asset, but because he made a lot of money, so when they divorce, it turns out if you add all the alimony, the child support, it's about $2 or $3 million over the lifetime. And then like she got the house too, one of the
Yeah.
houses. So I guess yeah, I guess it just works out. I'm depending because they didn't have a prenup. So I mean, I guess it's gonna depend on how the divorce attorney is gonna fight over each other, right?
Yeah,
Like
no,
how?
and
Okay.
that's what happens, And with respect to
Yeah.
New York, in New York, and it's interesting, you cannot include child support or anything related to kids in a prenuptial agreement. And there's a
Really?
public
Okay.
policy argument regarding that.
Uh-huh.
So some
Okay.
attorneys do include it. It wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be enforceable. Some people argue that it goes to intent. I don't include child support or custody in my prenuptial agreements because if
Mm-hmm.
there's a challenge, it's not going to be upheld.
Got it. So okay, so when you do prenup, I'm just curious, like, okay, when you get married, I mean, like, okay, you're not sure if you're gonna have kids, whatever. So you don't know how many kids are gonna eventually have. So how
Sure.
do you write that in the agreement? So that's what you're saying, that there's no more child support alimony because you don't know how many kids you're gonna end up having, right? So that's
Well, yeah.
okay. Okay, that's kind of determined when you divorce later on, and you just kind of figure out how much alimony and child support will be when you divorce.
So alimony you can include in the prenuptial
Oh,
agreement.
okay, okay,
Child
mhm,
support you cannot. So
okay,
child support, custody, anything related to the
okay.
kids, that's all separate.
Got it.
But
Got it.
yeah, but for a lot of people, they'll include alimony, or some people will just include one limited issue and they'll leave
Mhm.
everything
Mhm.
unresolved. The other
Mhm.
thing that people can do is you may sign a prenuptial agreement, or let's say you don't even have a prenuptial agreement at all. I
Mhm.
work with a lot of clients, a lot of people who will come to me during their marriage, no prenuptial agreement in place, and they'll look to do a post-nuptial agreement, which is the same type of agreement, but it's post-marriage. And
Oh.
I'm seeing that a lot, especially since the pandemic. People are starting online companies, online businesses.
Oh, got it.
It's after the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, when people
Mhm.
got laid off, people looked to start companies and businesses. And anytime you try to start a business, partnership, an entity, you also look to protect it. And if it's something you're trying to start during your marriage, the same mindset and concept, if you were doing this before the marriage with a
Mhm.
prenuptial agreement, would apply to a postnuptial agreement after marriage.
Got it. Wow. I That's the first time I heard post-nuptial. I always hear prenup. Oh, wow, that's
No,
a new thing.
it's conceptual. If you think about it, prenuptial agreement, premarital planning,
Yeah.
and the other thing too is a lot of people don't have, you know, don't think about talking about money,
Mhm.
talking about finances before they're
Yeah.
married, and
Yep.
then at some point something happens during the marriage and a light bulb goes off. I mean, I'm sure, Christine,
Mhm.
you see it,
Yep.
with your
Yep.
clients and your practice where
Yeah.
people will come to you later in life and you wonder where were they 10, 15 years ago? And it's not any
Mhm.
different, than, the post-nuptial agreement process.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So I guess it's still the same thing. I guess prenup and postnup. The only thing difference is that one has a marriage contract, the other one doesn't have a marriage contract yet.
And I'll tell you something funny is that the post-nuptial agreement conversation is a harder conversation to have than the prenuptial agreement conversation
Oh.
because you're
Okay.
already married. So you're married, you may have a few kids, and if your spouse does not agree to the post-nuptial agreement,
Uh,
you don't have any options. I mean,
yep.
at the very least, if someone doesn't agree to a prenuptial agreement, I've had people not go through with weddings. So at least there's an out. The only out, if your spouse won't sign a postnup, is you either stay married without an agreement or you think about divorce.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah, you have a very messy job there, Evan.
I love it. It's 24/7. There's never a dull moment, and that's one of the reasons I love it because every day is different. Working with families and people, it's
Mhm.
it's a wonderful thing. It's and no family, no situation is the same.
Yeah. How do you stay sane, Evan?
How do I stay sane? It's a great question. Yeah. How do I stay sane? I love to read outside of
Okay.
work. I love to read in the little free time that I have. You try to find an outlet outside of work. I think which makes all of us better professionals, better at their jobs. But the truth is, when you love what you do,
Mhm.
You don't think about it. You figure out a way to block out, the noise. You figure out a way to
Yeah.
focus on what you love doing and helping people and helping
Mhm.
families. And when you
Mhm.
love your job and love what you do,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
when you hear people say they've never worked a day in their life, it's true if you really love what you do.
Yeah. Well, you clearly love what you do, Evan. That shows.
I
So,
do.
okay. Are you familiar with Nevada? How does Nevada works typically with
You
the
know,
prenup? Is it community property or no?
I'm not. It's a great question. I'm
Okay.
not familiar with Nevada. Every
Okay.
state's different. Every
Okay.
state is different. Both in terms of how assets are divided
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
event of a divorce, but also the requirements for prenuptial agreements. It varies state to state.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I'll have to read more about that later. Okay. So Michael asks, commute property only applies to couples who live together and don't generally apply if you're separated and living apart. Uh, do you have a comment on that?
Um, so again, I can speak to New York, which is not
Okay.
a community property state. So New
Mm-hmm.
York, when you hear the terms, so for example, in New York, we'll use the term separate property, which is money you're coming into the marriage with, premarital property, or
Mm-hmm.
marital property. Things that, again, there's exceptions, but assets, income, things that people acquire during the
Mm-hmm.
marriage up until the time a couple may get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
Different states use different terminology: community property, um, marital property, joint property, separate property. But depending on the state that you're in, the,
Mm-hmm.
the, the words have different meanings. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's hard to speculate. And
Mm-hmm.
again, my expertise is New York, New Jersey. My firm has an office in New Jersey. But again, different meanings for different words.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Michael. Okay, so let's talk about divorce and money. So I'm just curious, like, what is the most challenging you usually encounter with divorces, and what are the common theme and I guess fights or drama you typically see with divorce? I'm sure it's like, oh, one person want more, one person like, and then you are representing only one, so there's no conflict of interest, right? So
Correct.
yeah, so I'm curious to hear the stories.
It's a great question. It's a loaded one. I mean, to really answer this question, we probably need about 3 more hours because
Okay, summary.
the stuff that I see, you see it all, right? You see it all, and you see people fight and argue over millions of dollars, and you see people fight over a wedding gift, a bowl from Bed Bath and Beyond that costs $5, and people would rather pay their attorneys more
Wow.
money than the item's worth fighting over.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about divorce and money is that both sides should be represented. Both sides, again, I can only represent one
Yep.
person going through a
Yep.
divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And the topic of money and divorce is hard. It's a very hard thing and a hard conversation to have, right? Nobody walks into my office and says, life is great. Our financial situation is wonderful. Someone's in my office because there's a reason. Someone's hiding assets. Someone's hiding money. There's a lack of transparency. There might be something going on in the relationship from a romantic, standpoint that someone is not happy about. I've never had someone sit across from me and is happy. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in my office. What I
Yep.
like to do and what I think is important, every person I work with has to have a plan, right? A short-term plan, a long-term plan, and really whatever the client's goals are, you really want to fit those goals into a plan. And,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people argue again over all sorts of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the question for people is at the end of the day, how do you divide a pot, right? You
Mm-hmm.
figure out what are the assets, what does each person want? Is there a way that we could get an agreement for what's important to each person? But the topic of money, divorce brings out, the worst in people. You see it,
Yep.
you feel it, you're a part of it in terms
Yeah.
of going through this with your clients. And what I try to do as an attorney, take a step back, right?
Mm-hmm.
I tell my clients, make me a list, right, of what's most important to you. And if number 9, we don't need to argue over it, right? Prioritize
Yeah.
what's most important.
Yeah.
Don't argue about the ninth, 10th, or 37th thing
Yeah.
on your list. Focus on what's important to you, your family, your kids. What is going to help put you in a position to move forward and transition to the
Exactly.
next phase of your life. And
Yep.
if you can work with
Yeah.
your clients to organize their minds, their thoughts, and
Mm.
prioritize,
Yep.
I think it's I think it's a great way to proceed.
Yeah.
I don't do it alone. I always recommend, or I often recommend to my clients, work with a financial coach, work with, a third party, right? Work with a team of professionals to help you get to the place where, that you want to go. Because divorce, look, it's arguably the most challenging thing and time in a person's life, right? And I
Yep.
think as an attorney, you need to recognize that, and you need to surround your client with a wonderful team of resources, professionals to
Mhm.
help work with the client and to
Mhm.
transition him or her.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, that's why it's so important for you to stay grounded and sane, because all your clients are just like, they're always in heat. They're just pissed off. They want to be right. It's almost like you said, like they're fighting over a $5 ball, whatever, and then they're willing to pay a lawyer who costs a lot more than that, because it's like
A lot
a
more.
power. It's like a power struggle. So it's like, it just kind of makes me sad. It's like, if you've been, most of them have probably been together for years, right? Before they
Yeah,
got divorced, whatever. But it's like, I'm sure there has been love there, or care. If you have kids, you raise kids, and then, but it's like, they just focus so much on the negativity, on the anger. I want to win, instead of like, hey, how can you part peacefully, get what you can have, and then just close this chapter and move on, right? Because it's hard for all parties. So
it's hard.
yeah.
You bring up such a great point. Look, at one point, people said I do, right? Every
Yeah.
divorcing
Yep.
couple got married, and people lose sight of that.
Yeah,
People lose
exactly.
sight that there may be
Yeah.
kids involved. And when you
Yeah.
lose sight of the fact that, look, you may be getting divorced, but if you have kids, you're going to be in each other's lives, right? There's going to be
Exactly.
birthday
Yep.
parties,
Yes.
graduation. You're
Yes.
going to have to discuss money,
Exactly.
even if you're
Yes.
divorced, college payments, high school, private school, whatever it may be,
Yep.
you're
Yep.
tied together. And
Yeah.
we may not have been the perfect spouse. We may not have
Yeah.
been, in our relationship,
Yeah.
but we
Yeah.
need to co-parent for the kids. And when you lose sight of that, it really
Yeah.
brings out the worst in people. People say
Yeah.
to me all the time, I would rather spend all my money on attorneys than give my spouse anything.
Yeah.
And when you really think about the statement and what someone says, there is something going on underneath the surface that you need to
Exactly.
flush out because
Yep. Yep.
it's not logical. And I think the more
Yep.
you can flush it out, work with your clients,
Yeah.
help shift the conversation and focus the conversation, it's a better approach.
Yeah. Do you recommend them sometimes to a therapist or the life coach, actually? Because some of them, like, because you get so consumed by anger. Like, it's like, they're just not in their heart. They're just in their head, all about being right, all about winning and stuff like that. And sometimes, like, they just have to go back, stay centered, and like go back to what is really the most important, which I think like you're doing a good job. You say, okay, what's the most important thing to you? So you just remind them. So are you usually pretty successful with that? So what if you're not, what if you're not successful in trying to convince them about that? So do you just kind of follow what they really want? Let's say they're really fighting for something, they really want the $5 ball. So are you able to convince them like otherwise? Like, how other ways have you
Yeah,
helped on that?
it's a great question. So, usually the clients that I recommend work with life coaches, financial coaches. They'll agree, right? So, usually, for the most part, when I make a recommendation to a client, I find that my clients will agree. When clients don't agree, you find another mechanism to help a client see the big picture. And sometimes it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes the anger is too
Yeah.
real and it's too fresh. And I get it, and part of it is knowing your client, right? Knowing him or her, knowing, why is someone feeling this way?
Yeah.
And maybe the timing isn't right for someone to work with a,
Hmm.
different
Yep.
professional, to help him or her see certain things.
Hmm.
So you figure out a different mechanism. But generally, I find that most people, right, at
Hmm.
their own, not everybody comes to this realization at their, at the same time frame, but
Yeah.
most people will eventually see the benefits to settling the divorce, reaching an agreement, and putting this process behind him or her, as
Yep.
opposed to keep fighting.
Yep.
Because the longer you fight, nobody wins, right?
Yep.
Nobody wins. You take and divorce. Look, there's options. My firm
Mhm.
practices mediation, collaborative law. There's
Yeah.
amicable ways to
Yeah.
divorce. There's amicable ways to separate. There's amicable
Mhm.
ways to have the conversation about
Mhm.
the process, about
Mhm.
what this will look like going forward. And when
Mhm.
you hear the horror stories, and you
Mhm.
know, and everyone has, in their mind the war stories and the ugliness that they hear or they read about. Not every divorce is like that, and divorce doesn't have to be like that if you have the right attorney, the right
Mhm.
mindset, and the right approach.
Yep. Got it. Okay. So let's talk about from your perspective, what are the money mistakes people make and how to avoid them?
Before marriage, during the divorce process, or both?
Let's talk about both.
Sure. So it's a great question. So before marriage, the biggest mistake that I believe people make is actually not having the conversation at all, right? Because if you do not talk about money, if you
Yeah.
don't talk about expectations, right? If you don't communicate to your
Mhm.
soon-to-be partner, your soon-to-be spouse, right?
Mhm.
You're going to end up in my office 5 years later. I mean, it's I guarantee it because things will come up, and if you don't have a transparent conversation before you're married,
Mhm.
how are the two of you going to tackle
Mhm.
difficult conversations, difficult things that come up? Someone may
Mhm.
lose a job, unfortunately. Income one year may be much less than income in previous years. How are you going to handle that? You need to have a conversation about lifestyle, about
Mhm.
expenses, about saving, about budgeting.
Mhm.
It's amazing to me when people come in looking to get divorced, how many people have not had a conversation? And people will say, well,
Wow.
just my husband handles the finances, or just my wife handles the finances, or you know what, I'm in total, I'm in the dark.
Yep.
I don't know our accounts. I don't
Yeah.
know
Yep.
where the money is. And,
Mhm.
you know, I encourage both people in a
Yep.
relationship. Educate yourself, be part of the process. And that shouldn't
Mhm.
start when you're getting divorced. Educating yourself and being aware of your financial situation. How do you want to live your life? Is your partner, is your spouse, are you on the same page? And if you're not on the same page, figure it out before you get
Mhm.
married, not 6 months into it, 5 years into
Exactly.
it, 15 years into it,
Exactly.
because it's going to only make things more difficult.
Yep. I really think everyone should always talk about, like you said, like I do have clients where in like, oh yeah, my husband or wife, they just don't really care about the money because I'm the one managing it. But I think
Mhm.
like you just don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, it's good if you stay forever, then maybe that's okay. You just let the other person
Correct.
manage it, right? Because some people they just don't want to deal with money at all. So, but then like you just don't know what will happen. But and then like you said, like that's just one of the important things to talk about. If you can even talk about money, I mean, how can you talk about other things? Like you should be able to talk about everything. I mean, you're
Everything.
married, right? Yeah.
And the other,
So.
the other thing that I see a lot is on the issue of debt, right? Tying debt into
Mhm.
the money conversation. People will get married and people won't know how much debt, let's say student loans, right,
Yep.
that someone has coming into the
Yeah.
marriage. And it goes back to what I said in the beginning: be transparent, be communicative, have a conversation. How are the loans going to be paid? Is it going to be paid from a joint account, a joint bank account, or someone's individual account? You know, it's better to have that conversation before marriage. Talk about it, right?
Mhm.
Talk about what is this going to look like for us going forward.
Mhm. Yep, yep, exactly. So Kevin made a comment. This is why premarital counseling is vital, especially in the church. That's good, right?
That's
I
great. That's
well,
great. Kevin, you're spot on. It's a great
yeah,
point, and it's about having the discussion, right? Start the discussion, start the conversation, reach out
yeah,
to
yeah.
professionals, work with a team, and you'll find that you'll continue if you do that before your
Mhm.
marriage. It's what I
Mhm.
said earlier. It's a relationship strengthening, a relationship defining moment, and you'll
Mhm.
find that that will continue and carry through
Yep,
your marriage.
yep. You know, it should be by law, federally, before you get married, get a premarital counseling. Like there should be a checkbox there that you went to therapy for maybe 1 month before you get married, right?
Boot
There should.
camp, relationship boot camp, absolutely.
Oh, that's a new idea. Okay, for anyone listening, do premarital relationship boot camp.
Yeah, no, and it's true. And the reality is, look, you can call it what you want, but the
Mhm.
premise is real and it's important, right? If you don't have these conversations, finance, money, debt,
Mhm.
prenuptial agreements, estate planning, wills, right? You have to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
I would say extend the conversation, beyond just
Mhm.
money, right? What are your
Yep.
expectations from one another with respect to working? I see people
Yep. Yep.
come, 5, 10, 15 years later, sit in my office and they'll say, my husband, my wife, my partner never worked, never got a job, right? I encouraged him or her, but he or she didn't work. And then you'll hear the exact opposite from the attorney who represents the other side, that really the expectation was only one of the people in the relationship was going to work, and each person had a
Uh,
separate role and responsibility. And when you hear such different things and such polarizing opposite things, I wonder, did anyone have a conversation before they got married or soon into their relationship what the expectation was? And if you
yeah.
did, and this is the end result, something went wrong in that
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. It's like, why did you even get married? What was the foundation of the marriage? It's like, what are you guys talking about? Obviously, it didn't work out because they got divorced.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the other thing that I'm seeing is a lot of young couples, right? Young couples, people getting married at a very young age, who are not having these conversations. And,
Mhm.
whether it's for whatever reason, the debt conversation, the money conversation, it's a very, I'm seeing it a lot. And I'm seeing the divorce rate or young couples, getting divorced and they're not having this conversation.
Yep. So you said you also work with athletes. Like, what kind of athletes and what's such usually their, I mean, obviously they make a lot of money. So what are usually the typical issue that comes with athletes? Like, are they the
Yeah,
same, or like what other unique issues for athletes?
that's a great question. And in the entertainment and sports, industries and space, it's really in the prenuptial agreement, process, protecting wealth, protecting assets,
Hmm.
protecting certain business ventures that certain professionals may have, protecting future income streams. And the thing that's unique about professional athletes is that professional athletes earn a lot of money in a very short time frame at a
Mm.
very young age. And professional athletes will earn this amount of money often, let's say, in their 20s. And then in sports, you can retire, you can get hurt, something will happen. So you obviously have to have the life insurance conversation and disability insurance conversation as well, But what happens when an athlete is 30 or 40 and they're not earning the same income that they were earning during the marriage in their 20s? So
Yep.
you have lifestyle conversations. But a lot of the work that I do is really in, the early stages. And again, for the reasons that athletes earn a lot of money in a very short time period, and then you retire, you go on to other things, or something happens. And the other thing with athletes, and entertainers, there's a lot of business opportunities. There's,
Hmm.
with social media and things like that, there's the brand that athletes have and entertainers have that they're looking to protect. So the issues are somewhat similar,
Hmm.
but they're just magnified.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So before we end, Evan, so like, do you have any advice for people? Especially when it comes to like finance and marriage and prenup.
It's a great question, and the answer, what I would say is have the conversation, communicate. It really, to me, comes down to communication and defining expectations. And if you can define expectations and communicate those expectations, what you can make a hard conversation, a challenging conversation, one of the most important conversations that you will ever have with the person that you're about to marry. And I think
Yeah.
the mistake and what I see is when people don't have the conversation, right? It's not good. It doesn't end well. And I would say communicate, discuss it, discuss money, be
Mhm.
transparent and work
Yeah.
with, professionals, work with coaches, work with, surround yourself with really great professionals who can guide you, who can discuss things with you, and who can talk you through, the process of financial planning.
Yep. And then remember, if you can't talk about everything with a partner, just don't get married. Why get married? So don't get married. Don't get into this mess of prenup, like divorce. Like just keep it simple. Just
Only if it was that easy. Look, there's nothing as real. We all know there's nothing simple about marriage, and there's definitely nothing simple about divorce. Yeah.
yeah, you don't need a contract. So actually, aren't there states wherein like if you live together with someone for a bit of time, then you're considered married? Like that 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 happens in several states, right? Like if you
That I'm not
live.
sure about. It's not the way it is in New York. So
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, but there are states wherein if you live together with someone long enough, you're considered effectively married.
That I don't know. There may be
Okay,
certain rights that someone
okay,
receives, whether you're
okay.
considered married or not. Again, every state,
Got it.
is different.
So in New York, you can live with someone for 10, 20 years. If you're not officially legally married, then you don't have rights over the other person's assets.
Correct. There's certain rights that you receive by virtue of being married, and what that would entitle you to
Hmm.
in the event of a divorce.
Okay. Okay. All right. So okay, so how can people find you, Evan? Like what type of people I guess I'm going to tag you here. Obviously you're on LinkedIn. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know where else you are, and then if you want like if people have any question about something, you specialize in New York, so you guys can connect with Evan if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
people can go to our firm's website, Berkman, Bodker, Newman, and Schein. The website
Mhm.
is www.berkbot.com. I'm on
Okay.
LinkedIn as well. And
Yep.
Christina, it was great being with you and your audience.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, you can hang around Evan after this. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you everyone for joining, and have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.